It's time once again for the Overcoming Mediocrity podcast, where we sit down with today's top influencers and entrepreneurs on the rise as they share empowering stories and ninja tips to become the fuel that ignites a positive change in your life and the lives of others. Our guests don't simply coast through life. They don't let difficult situations stop them. They set big goals, keep their eyes on the prize, and they're joining us today to share insider secrets you can use right now to step into your power and live your purpose. Now here's your host, Christy Ruffino.
Are you ready to step into your greatness? Do what you need to do to ensure that the next chapter of your life, your next story, will be written your way. Well, hi, I'm Christy Ruffino, the host of this show and the creator of the Overcoming Mediocrity Project, where everyday women tap into the power of their stories to magnify their message and elevate their brand so they can enjoy a business and life of true significance. I'm happy that you're here because this show is for people like you who are on the edge of change. You're ready to rise up, overcome mediocrity, empower your thoughts, elevate your thinking, and transform your life. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's get started. Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Overcoming Mediocrity podcast. And I actually am really excited to be able to share with you our guest for today. She is Dr. Jean Kadkhodaian. I've known her for quite a few years, and more importantly, she is one of the authors in our Overcoming Mediocrity Fearless Women edition. She has an amazing story, and that journey has led her to become an expert at what she does now, her and her husband, Ray. And she, let me just say, she is a fountain of wisdom. I not only had one page of notes, but I went on to pull out another page of my journal, and I just took a lot of notes from all of the things she has to share. Dr. Jean Kadkhodaian and her husband, Dr. Ray, have been counseling thousands of couples since 2002. They work with their couples as a couple. So I'm sure there's like a system in all that. Their experience inspired them to create the couple synergy method. There you go. It's a proven system to develop strong, resilient, and empowered relationships. You can join their online community called Connections, and you can also listen to live weekly webinars. In addition, you can learn how to work on your relationship through their #1 podcast for couples called Couple Synergy, Real Couples, Real Stories. You will be able to treat you and your partner to a fun-filled relationship-boosting weekend intensive. That's another thing they offer. Or you can work with Dr. Ray and Jean personally through their premier couple-to-couple coaching program. Dr. Ray and Jean were married in February of 1998. They have 2 adult sons, a daughter-in-law, and 2 pet stingrays. Can you believe that? They also enjoy riding motorcycles, and I honestly didn't know that. So I'll have to make sure that we go riding together at some point. And they also enjoy scuba diving, hiking, and traveling. So I don't know if you're ready, but if you are not prepared with a new, fresh pencil, which I know people don't use pencils anymore, but a new pen and a piece of paper, or get out your phone to take some notes, because I know you'll be able to really be inspired. And I know there's some things that you're going to want to take note of. So let's go ahead and get on with this show. I will see you back, or you'll be able to hear us back in just a moment after our commercial break. Today's episode is brought to you by the Overcoming Mediocrity Project. Are you ready to share your story in a life-changing book with other success-driven women? Then what if you could use that book to get speaking gigs, podcast interviews, and possibly a new client or 2? Wouldn't that be great? Well, watch out, chicken soup. Here comes Overcoming Mediocrity. Our proven system can transform your struggle story into a powerful signature message, and then as one chapter in an Amazon best-selling book. Our process is simple and economical, and it will bring a lot of eyeballs on you, your business, and your big message to the world. We welcome you to apply to join our project. Just visit us at overcomingmediocrity.org and click on the apply button at the top of the page. We'll see you soon. Well, welcome to our Overcoming Mediocrity podcast. And today I have the pleasure of introducing you to our guest, Jean Kadkhodaian. And I actually had the honor of meeting Jean, 2-3 years ago. We were connected and shared her story in our Overcoming Mediocrity Fearless edition. And so welcome, Jean. I'm so excited to have you on our episode today.
Thank you. I actually have had a relationship with you for much longer because we've been part of the networking group since 2002. So yeah, long time. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember we were there was a lot of connections we had before we actually had conversations.
Because I was sending my staff.
Yeah, we were kind of like dancing around each other and just, seeing each other from afar, but then just really getting to know you and just seeing what an amazing woman you are, like the story, the journey that you went through to get you to the point where you first opened Lighthouse, your parent company, I guess you might want to call it, and then evolve into more of a niche expert with couple synergy, which I know you're going to share all about that, but I want you, from your perspective, tell the audience a little bit about your story and how your journey led you to both of those places.
So I guess it starts in the beginning with, I have 8 siblings and I grew up in a home that had a lot of chaos and a lot of, I got 6 brothers. So, there was a lot of fighting and stuff like that. And so I coped with that by working like full time when I was in high school. So I would work and go to school, and I was pretty lonely. And early on, I got into a relationship with someone that ended up being a fairly toxic relationship. We were together for 3 years. We got engaged on my 17th birthday. So, I was a mess. And about a year after that, he decided to go away to college, and I didn't have a plan. So I actually joined the Army. And when I got on the plane to go to basic training, I thought, I'm going to reinvent myself. At that point in my life, my maiden name is Zender, and I was a Zender, and the whole town knew who we were because we were such a big family. And so there was always like that label that you couldn't get out from under. And I was, the youngest girl, and I was really shy. And I got on the plane and I'm like, I'm not going to be that anymore. And I remember getting off the plane and like shaking people's hands and introducing myself and having this false confidence that actually going through basic training really reinforced. And I learned a lot about self-care and self-esteem and self-worth and discipline. And that really changed my life. And then I came back home and got kind of lost again and got pregnant, and at 20 years old. And so that was such a life-changing event of mine. And, back then, this was when people said, wait till you get married to have sex and all that. There's a lot more shame around it back then. And so what I did is I joined a single mom support group, and I decided, this is the work that I want to do. And I didn't think I was smart enough to go to college. I'd gotten an 18 on my ACTs. I didn't know much about school. So I took one class, like, who do you want to be when you grow up class? It was like this little 8-week class. And I got an A, and I'm like, oh. And then I found out I was dyslexic, and this was the beginning of the word processor. So I don't think I could have went to school unless I had that to correct my spelling and things like that. And, I muscled my way through school with my son. I think I started when he was 3 and finished my bachelor's when he was 8, and really just continued to work really hard on myself during that entire time. I was in a really toxic relationship with someone who, I couldn't really count on. He lied a lot. And so relationships became something that was a really strong passion of mine to really figure out how to do this. And at some point, once I finished my bachelor's, I bought my own condo, which was a huge accomplishment for me. And I spent 3 years, and I was actually going to plan on being single the rest of my life because I was so bad at being in relationships and they were so painful. And then I spent 3 years. And what I would say is you have to become the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. in order to be in a relationship where you have something to offer another person. And of course, once I got into that 3-year mark where I really knew myself, I had all these wonderful ways of getting my needs met through, family, friends, work, kids, pets, all over the place. And that's, of course, when I met my husband. And at the time, we were both working on our master's degree in clinical psychology. And we started, we were working in community mental health, and you'd get thrown into working with families or couples as an individual therapist. And there's very little training. And so we decided, I think we could do this better. So we started the Lighthouse with this way of working together as a couple with couples. And the incredible part of that journey is that, when I was 30 years old and my son was 9 years old, I fell in love with a guy who was 24, right? So Ray and I have this big age gap. We don't look good on paper, but we both had this passion. He too was just coming out of a 7-year toxic relationship. And so our drive to figure out, how do you feel safe and healthy in a relationship and supportive and grow together? And that was almost 24 years ago. We'll be married 23 years in February. And so as we started working with couples, we developed this method called couple synergy method. And doing this work, you can't do this work without living it. And so throughout our relationship, we have gone through, and we share this on our podcast, we fight, we work through stuff, we just continue to grow and learn and develop. And to me, I don't know any other way to live. It's never been really comfortable, but as painful as it's been just as awesome. And so there's always kind of this striving, because, anything that's alive is either growing or dying, and in a relationship is alive.
I love that. That's a really great soundbite, or a great quote, is anything that's alive is either growing or dying. Mm-hmm. Love that. So let's back up a little bit, because, you had a lot of things that brought you to where you are now. And we were kind of chatting briefly before the interview started, before we pushed record, how so many people, especially younger people, they don't understand that struggles or the problems or the challenges that they face are there for a reason. And I found, and I've seen over and over again, how, all of the different, you said the manure or the the stuff that we go through, that's kind of what shapes us into the person we are. But if you don't have that, I think you said something about, what was your analogy with the feather? I love that.
Everything that is alive has to go against the normal grain in order to grow. Mm-hmm. So fire and heat naturally rise and water naturally falls, but a plant has to draw water up from the ground and pull sunlight down in order to grow. And so there's always a struggle associated with growth. I know people don't like to know that or hear that, but it's really true. And so the analogy of working out, if you work out with a feather, you're not going to get stronger. You're not going to get healthy. You need the weights, you need the resistance. And, when you go through stuff in life, and it really is like, this is pretty graphic, but it's like a rotting pile of yuck. And what grief is the decomposing of that, the rotting, the decomposing. And then when it decomposes all the way, it becomes fertilizer. And that fertilizer is what helps you become. And so the choices always are, do I stay stuck in this smelly place, or do I let this decompose, process all the emotions, process what's happened, learn from it, find my wisdom, and then grow from that?
Yeah. Yeah. It either could break us or it can make us.
Yep.
And one of the icons that I've kind of used for years to really just kind of keep me grounded, because we all go through stuff. And there are times we wake up in the morning or can't sleep at night because, the weight of the world is on our shoulders. But what I like to always keep in mind is the visualness of a diamond, because a diamond basically is just a bunch of coal that's been, stuff that's been pressured so much that it becomes this brilliant gemstone. And so, the more we can just really allow that to happen, the brighter we're going to shine and the more impact we can make in the world.
Absolutely. And it's pressure.
Yes.
This is not a comfortable world to live in. This is how it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Okay.
I just want to say this, I was thinking about this earlier. When I was in the Army, every little company has a slogan, or every platoon or whatever. And the platoon that I was in, our slogan was tempered steel.
Ooh.
And so when they called you to attention, you had to say tempered steel, and what that means is metal that's folded and folded and forged and folded to become this really strong thing. And when you get into a relationship, that's what it takes. It takes leaning into all the emotional pain and leaning into, we always talk about when we're in the middle of a fight, we have this rule, like, if you make coffee, you have to give it to your partner, even if you're so mad or you just want to not talk to them at all. And it's like, you have to keep leaning in. And that's what makes you really strong. And so, like, the diamond analogy is like the individual, and the tempered steel is like that coming together.
Ooh, I like that. Wow. Great. So you've taken your wisdom from years and years of training in the industry to really start with Lighthouse Emotional Wellness, and that isn't necessarily couples focused, right? That's helping people with all different types. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
So the foundation of it is, we started working with couples, and then what would happen is our couples wanted their kids to come on board. So we actually have a second program called Family Synergy Therapy. And of course, we always work with individual people. So probably like 50% of the work I did was with couples and 50% was with individuals. And the individual work that I do, when we first started the company, Ray's like, do you want to get certified in something? And I'm like, I really want to learn hypnosis. And so I got certified in hypnosis and knew nothing about that world. And from there, really dove into understanding our spiritual anatomy and energy healing, and how to really use not just the talk therapy or the conscious parts of the brain, but the hindbrain and the limbic system, and using those as methods. Because when somebody goes through a trauma, they're going to respond in their fight or flight system, which is in the hindbrain. And so if they haven't really fully developed, they're not going to be able to do talk therapy very well. They have to get stronger in that place. And I kind of have a rule. I don't work with anyone just in hypnosis or energy healing, and I don't work with anyone just in conscious. It's like this merging of the two that really helps people 100% transform and not go into regression and fall back, which is what happens a lot of times. So then we hired a staff to work with the other people. And then we have people who do like EMDR, biofeedback. We don't have this right now, but we've had people that added yoga into therapy, or we had a personal trainer and she did boxing, which was awesome. So people would have a lot of anxiety or anger and she'd have them box it out. So really it's about, and there's not a lot of space for this in the mental health field to really bring in a lot of these different tools to help people. And so the Lighthouse is a place for our therapists to have the freedom to bring in things like aromatherapy or EMDR, things like that they want to integrate into traditional counseling methods. And so, yeah, individuals, kids, families, all of the above, but our specialty is couples and families.
Okay. Well, this is so exciting. What we're going to do is take a short little break. So do you mind hanging on a little bit, and we'll be back, and we're going to really dive into some great wisdom that you're going to share that you can help with our audience.
Sure. Sounds great.
Okay, great. Today's episode is brought to you by the Overcoming Mediocrity Project. Are you ready to share your story in a life-changing book with other success-driven women? Then what if you could use that book to get speaking gigs, podcast interviews, and possibly a new client or two? Wouldn't that be great? Well, watch out, chicken soup. Here comes Overcoming Mediocrity. Our proven system can transform your struggle story into a powerful signature message, and then as one chapter in an Amazon best-selling book. Our process is simple and economical, and it will bring a lot of eyeballs on you, your business, and your big message to the world. We welcome you to apply to join our project. Just visit us at overcomingmediocrity.org and click on the apply button at the top of the page. We'll see you soon. All right. Well, welcome back to the Overcoming Mediocrity podcast. We had a short little commercial, and our little commercial just kept going on and on and on. I'm just loving all of this wisdom that Jean has to share. And we were talking briefly about chakras, and specifically that I am more of a logical head person. And I know I want to get more into my heart and my energy and really understand it all. And then we were talking about what's going on right now with COVID and wearing masks. And oh my gosh, we could probably have a 2-hour conversation on this topic. So,
yeah.
Jean, let's talk a little bit about throat chakra and how the masks. I mean, I don't want to derail your topic. I'm not sure what you wanted to share, but I just think this is fascinating.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing about my journey is I do have a foot in both worlds. And that's what I was trying to figure out when we were doing couple synergy, because it's such a passion of mine and my husband's to work with couples. But I always bring in this other piece. And I thought I had to give one up for the other. And we found a way to make it both work. And that's why when we do like the weekend intensives, we do a component of teaching about meditation and sound healing and some spirituality stuff that really merged together.
Science together with is that what you're referring to? Just
yep,
to clarify?
absolutely.
Okay.
So what I was explaining to you in the fifth chakra is that it's connected to our sense of taste, our sense of smell, our sense of hearing, our bronchia, our lungs, and our throat, which are all the symptoms of COVID.
Yeah.
And so to me, when we have illness, that means we're going through some form of adjustment, some transformation. And so this is, in our fifth chakra. And before I was always talking about 9/11 as our heart chakra. So in the United States, the reason for that attack was the third world countries thought we had too much in terms of our survival stuff. We had too much money and too much luxury and too much of that. And so they came and attacked us from that. But we could have went back and just really wiped those countries off the map. We have the technology and the power to do that. But as a country, we said, wait a second, there's some people that feel that way and we have to protect ourselves from that. But there's a whole bunch of other people under tyranny as well. Let's go and support them and see what we can do to help. So we were coming from more of a heart-centered place. We saw that opening up. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, this fifth chakra, and we're told to wear masks. And the fifth chakra is about speaking your truth. And the difficult thing about speaking your truth, the fifth chakra comes from our spiritual center. Mm-hmm. So our truth is actually a small t truth. Capital T truth is gravity. Gravity is going to work the same whether you're Russian or American or have money or don't have money or you're young or you're old. It works exactly the same. Small t truth is like, what job should you do? How many kids should you have? Should you get married? Where should you live? What's true for you and what's true for me is completely different. And so we get away from that right or wrong stuff. And so it's a really important place to open up. And you see that in the world, right? Everyone's got a lot of strong opinions. Everyone is really frustrated. And I guess that goes back to this idea of taking personal responsibility. When you talk about the mess of your life, the garbage or the fertilizer of your life, if you take responsibility for that, then you have power and become empowered. If you want to give up responsibility, then you are in a place, what I call force, where you give up. Force is external. So you either give up your control to something external to you or something external trying to control you. And you see that in the different generations, like some really want to give up that control. And in all fairness, these babies have been on camera since birth. They have everything they're doing is being watched. They don't have that freedom. I mean, I remember being a little girl and you're in your bedroom and you're cleaning and no one's around and you're dancing and you're being silly and you're trying on clothes and they don't have that freedom. They're so monitored. So that's a part of what we're giving up. And hopefully this adjustment that we're going through kind of wakens us up to say, hey, what can we do? And how is this such a precious gift of being alive on the earth? What are we doing with that? What are we becoming? And that's one of the questions I ask everyone I work with. Why do you believe we're here on earth and what happens when we die? And to me, a relationship, a primary significant relationship is our highest form of spiritual growth and development because, anyone can be sweet in a room all by themselves, but get in a room with your significant other. And that is the person in the world that you are going to fight with the most, you're going to hurt the most, and hopefully heal with the most and love the most.
That is so true. That is so true. And I keep telling you and Ray, that when I get in a relationship, I am going to be the knocking on your door for help, because I know that it's not going to be easy. And I mean, I've been in dating relationships, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out. But you have to stick with it. You have to, at least from my perspective now, which wasn't my perspective years ago, even though it's bad and you want to bail, you can't bail. You have to make that decision that we're going to work it out together, even though sometimes in the morning, we don't want to bring coffee to that person. We're just so angry. We just want to give them the silent treatment, but that's how we're going to grow. We're
Right.
going to be committed and stay committed to serve that person, even when we don't want to. And we can say that about any relationship.
Yeah, I always think about that. Like, you're not looking for a perfect person because they don't exist,
Right.
but you are looking for someone who is willing to do the work with you. And so I always think about people who are dating or in non-married couples, like Chex Mix. You got the pretzels and the peanuts and the M&Ms. And when it's over, you can take out the pretzels, the peanuts, and the M&Ms. You can divide it back up and you're done.
Right.
But when you get married, it's like the flour and the sugar and the butter, and you're making a cake. Right. And all those ingredients transform. And in one of our podcasts, this pastor said, there's no divorce that's clean. You think about, you break a cake apart, that's so messy, it's so painful, and it impacts you the rest of your life. And of course, divorce can also be a very transformative part of a person's journey. And so that, we do that kind of work as well, because not all relationships should stay together. Mm. And this idea of working on it, I really want to talk about that, because I think a lot of people, we are raised with this fairy tale, like they fall in love and get married and live happily ever after. Well, we can use the analogy of your podcast. When you started podcasting, you don't know very much, and you don't even know what you don't know. And then you bump into something, and that frustrating time of figuring out how do I overcome this hurdle? And then all of a sudden you're looking around again, and you're like, oh, I could do this thing over here, or this thing over here. And then you're growing. And so relationships are developmental, they're growth. It's not pathological. It's not a problem that you fight. It's not a problem that it's uncomfortable, you have rough edges. It's actually normal. It's part of the journey. And so that the hard part is we don't know how to work through that. And so that's why we did our podcast, to teach people what they can do. How do you do this? And, all of the rest of the work that we do.
Yeah. I mean, how many elderly couples that have been together years and years and years, we look at them, or I look at them personally and think, oh my gosh, what dedication. Well, their life wasn't all a bed of roses. I'm sure that they had many, many things that they had to forgive each other for, and, get up every day. And maybe, there were times that were better and worse, different seasons in their journey together. But, now they still have each other, and they're still able to celebrate the successes and celebrate the wonderfulness of having that person by your side.
Yeah, there's actually a biological component to that, which is really fascinating. So, before I get to the biological, there's generational. So, when my grandparents got married, you just didn't get divorced. You didn't care about happiness. You didn't care about happiness in the job that you did. You went to work, you did your 40 years, you got your gold watch, you put food on the table. There's no this happiness business. This happiness business is hard work. So when my parents got married, my mom met my dad at 15. They got married and she was 19. She had 7 kids by the time she was 30. And so did most of the friends she had. They were all, that's how they lived. And she stayed home. My dad worked. Now we have so much option.
Well,
there's so many things.
Society, right? If you don't like it,
right.
Get rid of it and get a new one.
Right. And so you can't go back to your parents and say, hey, how'd you make that work? Because their life was so different. And so they did this study on our brain chemistry and what happens when we fall in love. And in the beginning, for the first 9 months to 2 years, our brains are like on drugs. They're just like, you can live on sunshine and water and you don't even need to sleep. And you're just, and I think that's our brain's way of saying, hey, it really is fabulous to connect with another human being. It's really worth it. And then that chemistry slows down and we go into something called the commitment phase. And the commitment phase is where you go, are we going to really work on this? Do we have enough in our romance phase to say, let's stick with it, because not being with you is not going to increase my life as much. And I would say, if I was going to define what is a healthy relationship, for my grandparents, it would be to be together till you're dead. But to me, it's a relationship that you're growing and thriving in. And if you're not growing and thriving in it, it probably isn't a healthy or successful relationship. And that's okay. In some relationships, maybe they're only going to last 10 years or 15 years. And they don't have that longevity, but they still serve that function and that purpose to get you through that part of your journey. So then once you make it through the commitment phase, you get into what we call the transition phase. And this is where most couples don't make it, unfortunately. This is where the work is. This is where, you were raised like this and they were raised like that, and that's your domestication. But somewhere in the middle is healthy. We're not designed to marry our siblings and the people that grew up exactly like us. We're designed to have this whole other perspective, and finding that is not a painless experience. And that transition phase is, we were interviewed on our podcast, and someone asked us what if we have issues. And I was like, oh, we don't have issues anymore. Issues are in the beginning, like who's doing the dishes, who's going to pay the bills, those kind of issues. What we have now is healing moments and bumping into wounds and stuff coming up for healing, and a forging of who we are as a couple. And that really does take 20 to 25 years to get to. And so what you're seeing in couples that are 25 years plus, if they did the work, their brain chemistry is more exciting than the people in the beginning, which is really cool. And they found 2 periods where it dips, the 4-year mark and the 10-year mark. And their hypothesis was, if you got together and created a child, the child's physical development up till age 4 was going to have a much more success rate of survival, especially if we lived on farms or out in the wild or something. If it was a single parent situation after the age of 4, if one of the parents left. And then at 10, and we're talking back in the day at 10 years old, when people were like really, really mature and independent and had been working on the farm forever. So at 10, their chance of getting to full adulthood and reproducing was greater. And so they think biologically we're designed to have those kind of impacts at 4 years and 10 years, and then the 20-year mark. Mm-hmm. So it is. And the payoff is there if you do the work.
Well, and that's kind of one of the things I want to make sure that I clarify. You had mentioned that people are in relationships, for that period of time, but sometimes they're not meant to be permanent, long-term, forever relationships. But if both people are committed to doing the work, well, that's what you need, right? Because if they're both committed to doing the work, then you will, even though it may be difficult, then you will be able to forge together, correct?
Right. So the couple synergy method that we teach is a 12-week course. And this course is designed to show you the process of how you do the work. So during that time, and this is what we developed after working with people, they can only tolerate about 3 months worth of that intensity. Mm-hmm. And this is not traditional therapy. We're not diving into things. We're showing them, here's your relationship dance. Here's how you communicate. Here's where your communication is breaking down. And here's how you show up for your partner to help them heal those wounds that really have almost nothing to do with you. Although when they're talking about, the toothpaste or whatever, it seems like that. But we call that an iceberg. So you're looking at the 15% above the water, which, you're part of. You probably hurt your partner or they hurt you, but it's sitting on 85% of history, and the pain is 100%. And so there's this really beautiful sculpture that I always like to show from the Burning Man. And it's this, if you Google child sculpture Burning Man, it's these 2, a man and a woman, like a wire outline of a man and a woman's body. And inside are these 2 glowing, like 2-year-olds, like reaching for each other. So the woman and man have their back to each other in a big fight, and the inner child is like reaching for each other. And that's really what happens in relationship. If you could see your partner as a 4-year-old that's hurting, you certainly wouldn't go up to a 4-year-old and be like, knock off. You'd be like, oh, what's wrong? Oh, and we lose that with our partner because it's so personal and so painful. So we teach them that whole process. And then at that point, they know how to do this kind of work, and they understand themselves to that level. And then from there on is the growth process of that. And so people want to go to therapy and they don't understand all the underlying things, and they want to fix that little bit at the top, and it doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And so it's really growth through that kind of stuff that we are really passionate about teaching, and why we continue to teach, because you become a different person. I mean, when a couple's been married for 20 years, the person they married is long gone. And the person they were when they stepped up to get married is long gone. And we forget to go reintroduce ourselves to our partners, and we get stuck in these ruts. And most couples need a marriage manual. You would think it should be organic and it should just fall in place, but they really need to know, what do I need to do? And most couples are not doing relationship behaviors with each other. And we see it all the time. They're not spending any time together. They're sleeping with their kids. They're getting their emotional needs met everywhere else except with their person, which is really painful for both of them. But it's so vulnerable to open up and say what you need and possibly get rejected. And so they stay in this place that we call parallel lives. So it is as painful as it is rewarding. And if you don't know what you're doing, it's very scary and very painful.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think, wow, this is really good stuff. But doesn't it still go back to, you need to become, like you said initially, is you had to become good on your own first, because you can't get into I mean, of course, we're never going to be perfect. But if we have a lot of major baggage that we haven't dealt with, it definitely would behoove us to try to work on that first.
So what we look at, and that's, we do both of those processes when we're working with people, because when we're talking about communication breakdown, we are not talking about vocabulary, so what happens in our domestication is what we learn from our world that we're in as young people. And we have our head and we have our heart. Those are our two centers of power. And what happens as kids is we're often taught not to trust our heart. We're taught to follow the rules. And when we have a disconnect between our head and our heart, we will always defer to our head. And we're always going to defer to our head because that's what we know. What's in our heart is unknown. What's in our heart is risk and unknown and vulnerable. And so we shut that down. So if we go back to sort of a little bit about the chakra system, but also how it works in our biology, all information comes in through our head. It comes in through our hearing, through our eyes, through our senses. And so it's just information. And if you think about that, like a pot of water is information just sitting there. And then if we apply understanding, we get understanding through applying emotion, which is the throat, right? And that's like fire underneath that pot of water. And if you put water on the stove and you add heat, nothing really happens. And you add more heat, nothing happens. A watch pot doesn't boil. Add more heat, nothing happens. But then at some point, if you keep doing that, you'll start to see it bubble. And then very quickly, you got this rolling boil. And that's when that information drops into our heart as wisdom. And you can't communicate with your partner unless that is working inside of you, because empathy is what's needed in order to have relationship. And empathy is simply, I can identify an emotion inside of me and I can see that in you. So if you can't identify it inside yourself, what you're doing is you're guessing. You're guessing at what that person might be thinking. And our domestication teaches us to guess. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to fix that inside your own system and really trust yourself before you can step into that with a partner in any way that's safe or functional.
Yeah. Otherwise, just like the sculpture, you're looking at that little, 4-year-old boy or girl, and you don't know even how to be empathetic because you've got so many things that you're trying to figure out for yourself. So, wow, this has been like such good stuff. Now, if anybody in our audience wants to be able to connect with you and learn about, your synergy, you're talking about, you talked earlier about, or with me, about how you have a couple programs that you do to help people. Can you share a little bit about what those are?
Sure. So Connections is our program. It's free. It's an online library of a lot of things we've taught. And then every Tuesday night we gather via Zoom, and at 8 p.m. And that is a teaching. So Dr. Ray and I do a different topic every Tuesday, and then we do a meditation. So we take the information and then we ground it. And that's every Tuesday night. And then also through that program, you can see any workshops that we're doing. And we do a weekend intensive that's coming up in April. Hopefully, we've already had to postpone it once because of COVID, but whatever. When we get to it, we'll get to it. We also have a podcast where we talk about all these topics. So that's called Couple Synergy, Real Couples, Real Stories, because everyone's asked us, like, am I normal? So we're like, let's interview couples and let them share their stories. You'll see, yeah, you're normal. Everyone's in this, and we get to hear it all the time. So if you go to our website, couplesynergy.com, there'll be like buttons to click, and that'll get you into the connections. And once you're in connections, then you'll get whatever information is that's out there. The podcast is on there, everything.
Wow, that is great. This was so wonderful. I hope you will be able to come back with us again in the future, because I would definitely love to continue this conversation with you.
Sure.
In the meantime, gosh, have a great holiday, and make sure everybody that's listening that check the show notes below, because the links to everything that Jean has will be there for you to connect with her as well. I believe, do you sell your Overcoming Mediocrity book on the website as well?
I don't know if that's up there yet, but I have interviewed many women from that. I love that project so much, because everyone thinks that everyone else has it down.
Yeah.
And nobody's got it down. And some of those people, if I looked at just their Facebook or whatever, or connected with them through business networking, I wouldn't know all the stuff they've been through. And so I love reading the stories, and then I read them, and then I reach out to them like, hey, you want to share that on our podcast? So we've actually interviewed plenty of them. And I think, what happened is COVID, because I was planning on selling them out of the office, and then I never even got to the online stuff. But I got to get that up there. That'll be in our Connections has products. So I can put it on that. So that'll be there. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Make sure you get the link to me, because we'll put that on our website, so they'll connect.
Great.
People will be able to find you.
Yeah. It's that technology. I'm going to send my people to your people.
Yeah. That sounds great. All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh.
And have a wonderful Christmas.
All right. You too, Jean.
Thank you for listening to the Overcoming Mediocrity podcast, where we believe that everyone can have the business and life of their dreams once they learn the art of mastering their story. Because mastering our stories is the key to everything we want in life. Our stories can either hold us back, or they can become the fuel that ignites a positive change in our life and the lives of others. We can choose. You can choose. Choose to overcome mediocrity with us. Let's achieve greatness together. To learn more, visit overcomingmediocrity.org. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.